Hi everyone, welcome to AOPA's Advocacy in Action webinar. I am Ashley White, AOPA's Director of Health Policy and Strategic Alliances, and joining me today is Sam Miller. You want to introduce yourself, Sam?
Hey everyone, for those I've met, nice to see you, and for those I haven't, it's great to meet you. My name is Sam Miller. I'm managing state and federal advocacy.
So obviously, Sam's going to be really involved in all of our advocacy activities, both at the state level and at the federal level. So I encourage you to reach out to him and engage with him and get to know him. He is the newest member of the AOPA team currently. We have someone else joining next week, so very excited to be building out this department. So we're going to launch right into the content for this webinar today. We're going to be focusing on committees of jurisdiction and how to know whether or not your member of Congress is one of the individuals that would be most influential in getting our legislation passed. We're also going to talk through some of the realities, some of the challenges that are associated with getting any legislation passed and why it's so important to build those co-sponsors and have the numbers that we need to move something forward. We'll also share the different steps that have to occur in order to get something to the floor in Congress for an actual vote. Before we launch into discussing the committees, I just thought we could provide an update on the Medicare O&P Patient-Centered Care Act. And I encourage you all, as we are doing this webinar, don't wait till the end to ask your questions. I think it's really important for you all to be engaged and ask your questions as we move along, especially if you have questions about the legislation itself. It's important that we get those answered for you. So pop your questions in the question feature inside the GoToWebinar panel, or you can chat us, whichever is easiest for you on your in your panel. So I'm going to share live numbers here. You're supposed to go live. Here we go. Okay. So this is our phone to action platform. This tracks all of the advocacy activity that we see across the country, both at the state level and at the federal level. And you'll notice that down here in our top states listed, you'll see New York. And the reason that New York has so many advocates is because it also has a state advocacy campaign ongoing right now. So if you want to know about the numbers specifically for the O&P Patient-Centered Care Act, you can go to aopavotes.org and to the AOPA Action Center. So this is, again, aopavotes.org, and this is the Action Center. And you'll see that 972 supporters have written their members of Congress to support this legislation. You'll see there are 212 individuals have written members of the Senate, and 760 supporters have written their members of the House. And so you can imagine that these numbers are actually very, very low. And so it's important that we share this campaign with all of our friends, all of our colleagues across the board, because we need to get these numbers up. It's really important. You may have seen our tweets this week and our posts on Facebook and LinkedIn, trying to encourage individuals to write their members of Congress to support this legislation. For those of you who may not be familiar with the O&P Patient-Centered Care Act, it is 4 provisions of this bill. It is bicameral and bipartisan. In the Senate, that bicameral means it's introduced in the Senate and in the House. And it has support across the aisle. It has a lot going for it in that way. It's a very bipartisan, non-controversial piece of legislation. But orthotics and prosthetics is a very small piece of the Medicare puzzle. And because of that, it makes it very hard to adequately educate members of Congress on the niche topic that we're trying to explain and have the change occur in the Social Security Act, which is what our bill does. It makes changes to the Social Security Act. So the 4 provisions of the bill are separation for O&P suppliers from DME suppliers in the Social Security Act. What that actually does is create distinguishing language that defines the services that are provided by orthotists and prosthetists in the delivery of O&P devices that separates those out from the definitions of medical supplies. And so it really does create its own subcategory to define orthotic and prosthetic services, not just the devices, but the services. In that language, it specifies orthotist and prosthetist. So it really is about signaling the importance of protecting that care, the provision of care, the care that you all, that your clinicians provide for your patients. And then the other three provisions are related to competitive bidding. And those provisions include the restoration of Congress's definition of what an off-the-shelf orthosy should be, which is something that a patient can put on themselves with minimal self-adjustment. The next provision, let me back up. And the reason that's important is because when Medicare regulated what can be competitively bid, they expanded that definition to include suppliers. And so what we see is that some of the codes that are listed as off-the-shelf orthoses really should never be delivered to a patient without clinical oversight. That clinical oversight is very important. And so we want to restore Congress's definition to make sure that items are not being competitively bid that should not be provided to a patient without clinical intervention. The next provision would prohibit drop shipping for any of those items that do not fall in that category of off the shelf. If it's truly off the shelf, like a neoprene knee brace or something you can purchase at a CVS, then it is eligible by definition to be delivered directly to a patient without clinical oversight. That's the reality of those types of devices. But there is a lot of devices that are being shipped to patients, and direct shipping from the manufacturer to the patient without clinical oversight is what constitutes drop shipping. So it's a term of industry, and it's defined in the legislation. If a patient has seen a clinician and is working with a PT and is seeing an orthotist, there is absolutely no reason why you wouldn't be able to ship them the appropriate sized brace they need. That shipping is a delivery mechanism, not considered drop shipping. And the final provision of the bill would exempt orthotists and prosthetists from having to hold that competitive bidding contract. They'd still have to bill at the competitively bid rate, and they would also have to accept assignment, so there's no balanced billing involved for the patient. But this exemption exists for OTs, PTs, and physicians right now. And that's in statute. When they defined what the competitive bidding program, they exempted PTs, OTs, and physicians. And so it's really important that orthotists and prosthetists are included in that list of exempted clinicians for purposes of delivering the devices that your patients need when they come to see you. So those are the four provisions of the bill. And again, we have 972 people have reached out to their members of Congress. So in terms of the primer, that's the background, and I will pause to see if we have questions about the bill specifically.
Not seeing any questions, but that is a good reminder to, if you do have them, please submit them into the questions field, and Ashley and Sam will address them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joy. So moving along, and we'll start to get into some of the meat of this. I'll again encourage you to go to www.aopavotes.org so you can add your name to that list of supporters asking your members of Congress to co-sponsor the bill. So Sam, I'm going to ask you a question. Since you've joined the AOPA team recently, what are the most interesting things you've learned about the legislative process, particularly with respect to Medicare O&P Patient-Centered Care Act?
Yeah, sure. So I think something that I've realized with like the amount of options that we have available to pass this bill. It can start in either the House or the Senate, like you said before, as a bicameral bill. It can be in different kind of subcommittees or committees, which we'll talk about later. Or it can be on a standalone bill, or it's kind of a larger package, and that gives us a lot of options to change our strategy based on kind of the political environment and how it changes over time, because you know how Washington is. But yeah, and then I think another thing that's important to me that I've noticed is kind of the bipartisan appeal of the bill, and that Democrats and Republicans really take a liking to different parts of it, and that really gives it a way to change our messaging depending on who we're talking to, and it helps us generate more widespread support at the same time.
Absolutely. And one of the things you shared with me earlier is, and something that we're going to kind of get into here in a minute with the committees, is being surprised sometimes when you talk to a member of the staff and they're very interested in the bill and they ask questions and they seem like they're super engaged, and then they say something like, my member of Congress probably won't co-sponsor this bill because they don't serve on a committee of jurisdiction. Can you talk about sort of the first time you heard someone say that and what that made you think?
Yeah, it was definitely very interesting because, like you said, they're very engaged through the whole discussion, and to kind of drop that at the end, it was like, ooh, that hurts a little bit. But it's really not, like a personal thing at all or anything like that. It's these staffers, usually they have to write kind of memos for their boss, for the congressperson, whenever they kind of want them to sponsor a piece of legislation. And a lot of members of Congress are already really busy at work in their own committees, and they don't want to take on that extra responsibility. So they leave those specific committees of jurisdiction to deal with bills that they may not be able to have the time for. And so they kind of trust each other to work on things in that sense.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so oversight of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, activity falls under the jurisdiction of the Senate Finance Committee, and actually the subcommittee on healthcare in the Senate Finance Committee, the Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee, and the House Ways and Means Health Subcommittee. So I'm going to share my screen and give you a little insight on what that actually means. So right now you should be seeing a list of committees here. And if you look, it might be tiny, but if you look down here at the bottom, you'll see there are 226 federal committees. 226, 3 of which we work very closely with. So if you've ever wondered, why hasn't AOPA met with my member of Congress? It's likely that it's because they don't serve on one of the committees of jurisdiction, which is where we really are focusing our energy. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go down here, show only federal committees we subscribe to, and you'll see here that these are our 3 committees. Like I said, the House Subcommittee on Health, which is the House Committee on Ways and Means, the Senate Subcommittee on Healthcare, Senate Committee on Finance, and the House Subcommittee on Health, which is the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. You'll see these are the chairs of each of those committees right now. The chair is always a member of the majority party. So whoever is in control in Congress at that time will be the chairman. The ranking member could be someone from the other side of the aisle. So you'll see that these committees are bipartisan in their makeup. So let's just start with the House Subcommittee on Health for Energy and Commerce. This is our primary subcommittee. This is the committee that has the most impact over whether or not this bill passes. What has to happen is that the bill has to be heard by the subcommittee and be passed out of this subcommittee to the full committee, and then it can be heard on the floor. So there's a lot of work for us to do just to get it out of committee before it's ever going to be voted on at large, which is one of the things that Sam was talking about when he said maybe there's another package moving of bills. A lot of times there'll be something non-controversial where different bills get added to that package, and then that package moves as a conglomerate of Medicare bills, as an example. If we wanted to get our bill attached to something like that, and some of you may remember, that's exactly how we were able to get the prosthetist and orthotist notes included as part of the medical record. That was actually attached to a Balanced Budget Act, which was a bipartisan budget bill that passed. And so having language ready to go and that the committee has already discussed and is familiar and comfortable with to attach to a larger bill is always a way. So that's why we focus our energy so much on the committees, because they're the ones that can make that happen for us. So as you'll see, these are the members of Congress that are serving on our primary committee, subcommittee of jurisdiction. So I'm going to ask, since we're here, if there's anyone right now who knows their district who may be in NC1 or California 18 or any of these other places, or if you see your state listed here and you're not sure if this is your district, if you'll pop your hometown or your district in your name, it'll show us who you are when you pop it in the chat. But let us know. Give us something to work with here. Give us a chat and see if we've got any of your members of Congress listed here. If you know your members listed, that's great. You can just say my members listed and tell us who it is, or you can tell us what your district is, or you can just give us your hometown and we'll look it up really quickly. Are we seeing any come in?
So drop it into the questions field. That should be the easiest way to do it. If someone wants to do that, I can read that out. All right, I have one.
Little Elm, Texas.
Yep, Little Elm, Texas.
Okay, let's see if I can find Little, oh, it locked me out. I said this might happen, y'all. Let me just get in here really quickly. Little Elm, Texas. Keep them coming. No reason to stop at one. Just keep them coming for us. Oh, well, there we go. We've got one that's on committee there already posted in there. I'm going to look up Little Elm, Texas while I'm in here, if I can get it to pull up. Let's see, cities. Haha, this is fun doing it in real time. I'm not seeing Little Elm. Okay, I'm going to back out here. Sam, could I ask you to see if you can find out what district Little Elm, Texas is in?
Sure thing.
Thank you. While Sam's looking up Little Elm, Texas, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Angie Craig. You'll see my screen now. So Angie Craig, you'll see, is listed here in the Minnesota 2nd District. And if we go to Angie Craig, she is someone that we have been meeting with her office. You'll see there's an activity listing here. In addition to meeting with a member of her staff, I also attended an event where I was able to meet with the Congresswoman and talk with her about our bill. And so our expectation here is that we will be able to add her as a supporter, in all things related to this bill. Now you'll see right now, the members of Congress who are co-sponsors of the bill are listed here on the screen under the co-sponsor title, with the introductory sponsor being Congressman Mike Thompson of California. These are our current co-sponsors. And so the idea being, as soon as we follow up with the Congresswoman's office, that we can add her name to this list. Again, we are meeting with many members of Congress every week. Every week is a policy forum for me and Sam, true story. And so the goal is to get more of the names from that list that we had here on that list that I just showed you of co-sponsors. Let's see, do we have any additional districts?
I popped Little Elm in the chat. That's actually Mike Burgess on the left, third from the top.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, we actually have received notification from Congressman Burgess that he is going to co-sponsor the bill. So we've already met with his office. We've already discussed the bill And all signs point to Congressman Burgess is an upcoming co-sponsor for the bill. Just to give you a little more detail, since this stuff is interesting, I hope it's interesting to you all. I nerd out on it, but you'll see. I met with Catherine Lenz in Congressman Burgess' office back on Tuesday of August 31st. And Jane is one of our lobbyists who attended that meeting with me. And we were able to just talk through the bill, the provisions of the bill, and request co-sponsorship. So some of you might be familiar with like your sales tracking software and things like that. So imagine one day that I'm gone, and you know, all of those meetings I've had, you know, they don't just live in my head, they live documented here in the system that is part of the infrastructure that we have in place to support our advocacy efforts and your advocacy efforts. So if you were to call us and say that you had the opportunity to invite Congressman Burgess, hint, hint, into your facility and share with him the work that you do with your patients, we would add that into this activity. We would create a new activity with the date that the congressman came to your office, and we would share all of the information about that meeting, or who was there and how it went, and that would be another point of contact with that member of Congress. So we're tracking all of that activity on a regular basis, you know, on an ongoing basis. So if anyone ever needs to look back and say, hey, where's Congressman Burgess in all this? Why isn't Congressman Burgess supporting us? You know, he said he was going to support us. You can look back and see what activity has gone on and to engage with that member of Congress. Again, we can always pull this report for you. If you're interested about your member of Congress, do not hesitate to reach out and ask us for that background information. We'd be more than happy to pull that information for you specifically. Does anyone else want us to look up their member of Congress while we're on? I kind of like this challenge. Okay, great. Well, I guess you probably understand what we're trying. Oh, I've got a hand raised here. Who's got their hand raised? Let's see. Oh, it's Brock. I'd love to unmute you, Brock, if you'd like to ask your question live. I'm unmuting you now. Brock? Oh, you submitted your question. Okay, you're not, we can't hear you, so I'm gonna see if I can read your question. Oh, yes, Jackie. Okay, yes, so you and I have already connected on Jackie, and you know, have exchanged emails about the Congresswoman and her role on the other committee. So I'm gonna pull her up right now. Let me share my screen again. So we'll go back to our committees page, and I'll share with you Brock's Congressman. Where is it? Did I miss it on the other one? Sorry about that. Apologies. Anyway, to back up for a second, Brock and I connected. We did meet with the Congresswoman's office recently and engaged, and there was some committee conversations, whether that was that she served in a previous role on the committee or not. I'll have to look back through our notes, Brock, but thank you for popping the Congresswoman into the chat for us. One thing I do want to say about members of Congress rotating on and off committees, and this is a great question I think that Sam has ready to ask me, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sam to ask that series of questions that he has for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that I was wondering kind of when I started was how members are selected for committees and how they're kind of placed amongst these 200 or so committees that there are?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it speaks directly to my brief moment of confusion there. So here's what happens. Just like any other job, members of Congress they're vying for positions on these committees. And the reason that it matters whether or not they get those positions on committees is because this is how they raise money. Being connected to constituent issues, usually it's going to be related to a field that's really popular in their district. So as an example, I'm going to go to Anna SU. I'm actually going to go back into sharing my screen and show you how this matters. So I'm going to go into Anna SU, who is the chairwoman of Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Health. And we're going to look at her district. So as I scroll down, you'll start to see that we've got the district map, all the median household income. I think we shared this during our last webinar as well. But you'll see here that in her district, healthcare, education, healthcare, and social assistance are the most lucrative industries, the most popular industries for members in her district to work in. So naturally, she's going to have constituents that are most engaged in healthcare in her district. And that means that in order for her to represent those individuals that are the highest employed individuals in that industry, she needs to serve on that committee. And those kinds of roles are competitive. And there are people who are looking to serve on multiple committees that are in very, very vastly different spaces. There are also individuals who are highly qualified to serve in a healthcare committee, as an example, because they are healthcare providers themselves. They're doctors, or they're allied health professionals, or they have experience working in the insurance industry, or whatever their background might be that makes them eligible and qualified to serve on a committee. So there's one of two things. They're either in a district that has high employment in an industry, in a profession, or they are members of that community themselves, and therefore they want to serve because that's where their knowledge base lives. So you're right, Sam, it's a very interesting dynamic, and it's kind of like, if you want, if you volunteer for a committee that you want to serve on in an association like AOPA, we hope you all will volunteer for committees. And you're hoping that you get chosen so that you can utilize your talents in that way. This is the way that it works in Congress as well. Any other questions you've got for me, Sam?
Yeah, I guess something that I was looking at is that there are kind of overlapping jurisdictions sometimes. I know Ways and Means is kind of specifically Social Security, and Energy and Commerce is kind of healthcare in general. And how do they deal with that overlap? Is there like a specific method?
It's a great question. So what we learned in the predecessor of this bill was called the Medicare O&P Improvements Act. And right up until the moment when we were preparing for the bill to be added into another piece of legislation, we thought that primary jurisdiction lived in Ways and Means. We were certain of it. We had spent a lot of time courting Ways and Means members. We had the majority of our supporters were from Ways and Means. And it wasn't until we had a standalone bill that we had pulled out that we realized that was the minimal self-adjustment bill that we used to have. It was a standalone bill at one point, that we realized that jurisdiction fell to Energy and Commerce. We went back through that process. It really came down to the fine line of financing and the competitive bidding program falling under Energy and Commerce, as well as the DME provisions are the oversight for those devices is under Energy and Commerce and not under Ways and Means. Ways and Means is the broader Social Security and Medicare jurisdiction for the Medicare system. And so those pieces of that puzzle are actually part of Energy and Commerce. And so we didn't know that. And we learned that during a pretty intense time in Congress where our bill was moving, and we had an opportunity to put that patient notes to become part of the medical record onto the budget, and that standalone bill was being drafted and introduced. And so all of those kind of functional things are what gave us that insight. And so now we know that we need to make sure we have a balanced, because it will go to Ways and Means, even if it gets heard in Energy and Commerce. Ways and Means will absolutely have to sign off on it. So one of the things that we get to do is work directly with what's called committee staff. So I'm going to go back over to the committee page again and share my screen and show you how there's actually staffers that are directly involved in working for the committee. So they may have been hired by a member of Congress that serves on the committee, but now their entire role as an individual working on Capitol Hill is to work on committee issues, committee specific issues. So Sam Satchel, you'll see down here, she is the member of the committee that we've been working closely with. So we have our lobby team checks in with her once a week. We talk with her regularly about our efforts. She has reached out to Medicare for what's called TA, it's technical assistance, to make sure that everything's above board with the language in our bill. We also request CBO scores, so the Congressional Budget Office scores every piece of legislation. We've requested that through our champions offices as well as through the committee staff. So again, the committees are really interesting parts of the legislative process and the legislative system that I think a lot of people don't know about. And it's why it's really important. I spoke at the COPA meeting last week in California, and five members of Congress from California serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee. So, having people from California reach out to their members of Congress, there's a good chance that one of those members is going to be from one of our committees. And so, I just really emphasize the importance of having folks from California engage, since I was there and on stage and able to say, act right now. So I think it's a good point about the shared jurisdiction and making sure that we still want to reach as many people as possible. Any other questions, Sam?
I think I just wanted to also add, kind of to your point about adding the orthotist and prosthetist notes into the medical record on the budget bill, is that those types of kind of additions usually do happen in those kind of larger, non-controversial bills, like a budget that is most likely going to, have to pass. So, the government has money to spend the next year, and that makes it a lot easier in that sense to pass kind of smaller additions like that get added in after the fact.
Yep, that's so true. One of the things that we should highlight is another function of the committees is the responsibility to hold hearings. So if any of you have ever been to a congressional hearing, I know there are some people on the line here that have been to congressional hearings with AOPA, particularly some VA issues that we've had representation during committee hearings. Those committee hearings, those hearings about any bill or any subset of bills are driven by the committees themselves. So they will hold a hearing, and members from Congress that have any interest at all in that legislation or that topic area can come. So they're not just designated for committee attendance, but they're put on by the committees. And so one of the things we're doing is tracking, and we're asking in almost all of our meetings now, you can attest to this, Sam, whether or not there's going to be a hearing opportunity for us to speak about this legislation. So we're tracking every hearing that is coming up through the committees, and we're seeing whether or not our bill is related to something that is being heard. And if there is a hearing that is relevant, then we're going to make sure that we have testimony prepared or someone there to speak on behalf, depending if it's a virtual hearing or an in-person hearing. So that's another thing that we're tracking regularly that comes out of the committees, which would be their hearings. And you'll see here, we don't have any upcoming hearings listed here, but there are regularly committees could be post their hearings, and as soon as we learn about them, we follow up and find out if there's something relevant for us to be part of. And I was not sharing my screen, so I'll go down and show that there's a hearing section here in our GovPredict platform that allows us to see what hearings are coming up. They also post them on their own websites, and right now they've just posted some today. So when this gets updated, it'll show some hearings for this coming week.
Before we move on, I just wanted to check. I think Heidi has a question.
Great.
Pull it out. All right. She's asking how to get Congress members' attention without kind of frightening them off if you're trying to get a topic, under consideration.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like our approach is very non-controversial and very soft touch. Our goal at AOPA is to make relationships with these members of Congress, to build an awareness of O&P and just a general understanding of what orthotists and prosthetists do, about the profession itself, about the industry at large, understanding the dynamics that go into innovation in our space, and all of those topics that are important. And so we serve as resources for these offices, and we position ourselves that way. So when we're going to a member of Congress, we are usually saying, it's so wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. The American Orthotic and Prosthetic Association represents the patient care facilities that provide services to individuals with limb loss, limb difference, and limb impairment, as well as the manufacturers of the components that go into those devices to make individuals mobile and capable of the things that they want to do in their lives. And so we kind of lay out this first introduction to who we are as a organization and as a profession. And then we talk a little bit about any personal experiences that staff member or member of Congress might have with individuals living with limb loss or limb difference. And so by the time we get into actually talking about the bill, we've established a rapport. They know who we are, they know why we're there, and we're not really trying to say, why haven't you signed on to this bill? We're trying to say, you really should sign on to this bill because it's bipartisan, non-controversial, and will help Medicare beneficiaries. And here's how here's all the ways that will help Medicare beneficiaries. So I would suggest that that you think about that, and in any kind of outreach that you make is designed to introduce yourself and introduce what it is that you do and what services you provide for your patients or your facility provides for your patients. Because you're right, it can be challenging for those staffers to receive phone calls regularly from people who are very upset about something, and we don't have to do that. We don't have to be on edge about what we're doing, because it's really hard for someone to look you in the eye and say that they don't support you. Again, the reason that we don't get as much movement is because we are a smaller profession with a very niche topic and niche patient population, and because our numbers are not that big in terms of how many people are working in this profession. I mean, the fact that only 972 individuals have even reached out to their members of Congress means that we still have a lot of work to do to educate people and the general public about the work of orthotists and prosthetists. So your question is a great one, and I encourage everyone to think about the role that you play as a constituent is to build a relationship with your member of Congress and their office or their staff or their district staff, anybody that you can get a hold of in your member of Congress's office is going to be a valuable asset for any issues that we have in this profession moving forward.
And also, kind of to add to that, just because your kind of representative isn't on a committee right now doesn't mean that they won't be in the future. So to have those relationships kind of built in is really helpful for if they do become a member of a committee and suddenly they have jurisdiction over an issue that you're really passionate about.
That's a really great point, Sam. That's a great point. And you'll see, if you look at the list of supporters, so I'll pull that up again so everyone can see who our current list of sponsors and co-sponsors are. So this is our Senate bill. We've got 6 total, 5. We have the original co-sponsor, the original sponsor of Senator Mark Warner, and then we have our 5 Senate sponsors. Only one of these sponsors is not currently on the committee of jurisdiction. So that's Senator Tammy Duckworth. And obviously she has a personal vested interest in this bill, and she cares deeply about these issues. And so having her support is tremendous, and it is also expected. If we didn't have her support and we were introducing a bill like this, it would likely get some side eyes, some sideways eyes, because it wouldn't seem right to not have her on this legislation, or at least have her blessing for this legislation. So she's been an incredible champion for us, and will continue to be. We're very close with the senator's office. And then for the House, again, I'll share that. These are our current members of Congress that are supporting. You'll notice that we just added one yesterday, and that is very exciting. We had this meeting. Following the meeting, we had this addition. So I think it just takes time. You just have to work it regularly and make sure that we're following back up, which is what Sam and I always do, and our team at Austin and Byrd does that work for us as well. Were there any other questions? Sam, did you see any other questions, or do you have any other questions or thoughts you want to share?
I am muted. I didn't see any questions in the chat.
Okay.
But I think that something else I wanted to know is how large and small can the committees be? I can imagine that if there are 250, there have to be some that are kind of smaller and some that are pretty big. I'd imagine also the Energy and Commerce is probably the biggest one, because it's just such a broad range of subjects.
Yes, so I'll start by answering the committee size itself. So again, it's important to remember that we're focusing in subcommittee and then the larger committee. So let me show you what the larger committee actually looks like. So we're in the subcommittee right now, but if you go to Energy and Commerce, the full committee, you'll see it's really, really big. So, the committee itself has several different types of oversight. We're likely not going to be a topic of interest in, someone that's doing really heavy commerce related topics, or energy for that matter. But, I have been to events with this committee staff that had, members of green energy, members of the wind industry or oil, because if there are members of the committee there, then there's opportunities for people to engage on their topics. I think Eve and I attended an event and there were a lot of telecommunications folks there, because that falls under Energy and Commerce as well. And so you can imagine the types of people that want to engage with members have just a really broad list of topics. And it's important to think about those issues and the way that they are. So the health subcommittee is helpful. There are some issues that don't have a subcommittee. Healthcare just happens to be such a massive industry that as a whole, that it has subcommittees in all of our main committees, which is, again, helpful for us because we can really kind of drill down on the topic as opposed to having to stay at such a broad level, high level, like telecommunications would have to. And then you asked about, who's the biggest here. I think Ways and Means is just from the numbers might be smaller, but from the topic list, it's just as broad. So if you're ever interested, you can just look up your committee online. Every committee has their own website, and you can kind of explore the different things that committee covers. will all be listed out on that website, on their committee website.
Yeah, and they can get pretty niche too, which is pretty interesting. There are some very small, like narrow policy topics that committees deal with, and I think that's really fun. If you're a big nerd on a certain topic, there'll be a lot of hearings in that area probably.
So I'm very happy to have a big nerd sitting here beside me on this on this webinar today. It's great to have Sam's mind now, having someone that you know, is just one step removed. I think having been part of the advocacy initiatives of AOPA's advocacy initiatives for so long, sometimes I get the blinders on, and having Sam as a new, you know, fresh mind in this space has been really helpful. I hope you all are encouraged by that. I think he's going to be great as your advocacy manager, and we're really looking forward to launching some new and exciting activities and benefits. One, I'll just go ahead and promote during the next webinar in November, our Advocacy in Action webinar in November, where we will launch something called the Advocate of the Month. And the idea is to just highlight individuals that have been engaged in not just submitting the letters to their members of Congress, but have reached out and asked how they can help, or have been previously involved in policy forum, or intend to be involved, or just have engaged in any way, really, on that advocacy level. And we want to say thank you. And our way to do that will be to highlight certain individuals who have been really active in advocacy. And so we're really excited about that. There's going to be some gift certificates given out over the months. And so we look forward to launching the Advocate of the Month next month at the November webinar. And we encourage you all to continue to come to these advocacy in action webinars, because they, you know, it can be boring sometimes. Like, I don't know how much nerding out you guys are doing with committee information, but we thought it would be really important to share this background, because people a lot of times will say, well, why has this bill been around for 10 years and still hasn't, you know, been accomplished? Why haven't we accomplished our goal? And I think all of these nuances, and like we said, members coming on committees and going off committees, and all of that really makes a difference. And our ability to be able to move something forward just means that we have to stay consistently engaged and broaden our scope in whatever way we can to find a vehicle for this to get attached to. The likelihood of it passing on its own is very, very small, but we will continue to work towards that goal as well. You know, it's a matter of finding a way to make it happen. So thank you all for attending the webinar this month. If I'll stick around in case, Sam and I'll stick around in case there are any additional questions. We are available for you to reach out to. I'll put my email address in the chat function. Sam, I'll ask you to do the same. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly if you have questions. Brock, yeah, nerds, Brock says. He asked if he can get a t-shirt. Do you want, yes, if you want a t-shirt, we will make that happen, Brock. Yeah, I have really enjoyed, I noticed from our attendees this month, really enjoyed working with lots of you in the past. And I would say that the attendee list is a great example of our most engaged advocates. And so thank you all for the work that you do, because we can't do this without you. Your voice is the voice that matters. And so keep up the good work, and thank you for attending the webinar today. We'll just stick around here in case anybody has questions.
And I've been thinking about the t-shirts for sure. So
yeah, are you guys
about merch? Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see what you come up with, Sam.
Well, you're welcome, Terry. Terry gave us a little thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Terry.
Brock's already got ideas. I appreciate that a lot. We need a good brainstorm session at some point.
I like it. Oh, we're getting t-shirt ideas in now. Okay. Okay. Oh, well, since people are still hanging out, some people anyway, I will say that one of the funny things that happened in California was someone asked me about the, the response that people have when we tell them what we do. And I said, most of the time people are like, people don't know. Most of the time people say they don't know someone with limb loss or limb difference or limb impairment that uses an orthotic brace or a prosthesis. And it's interesting because I think even though it is like a really specific and niche topic, most of the time someone is like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Almost every time they're like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And that's encouraging. I know that isn't, it doesn't mean that the bill moves, but it is encouraging. And I shared that with the California audience that, our topic is not controversial. It is easy for people to understand if we take the time to explain it and educate them about it. And so that's, again, why it's so important for you all to be engaged. And we are so thankful to you.
Brock was asking when our next state rep meeting is.
It's a great question. Sam and I have a meeting on that next week. So we'll have a date out soon for you. It's time to have a state rep meeting. Sam's excited, right, Sam?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And Brock says there's some good stories from Texas. So hold on to those stories. I definitely want to hear them. We're very interested.
Absolutely. Yeah, our expectation is that the next state reps meeting will be in November, and we will get a notice out as soon as Sam and I have a chance to connect on that next week. We're going to do some in-person training. It'll be I'll be in DC next week for meetings on the Hill, so Sam will be doing his first on the Hill meeting next week as well. So really excited about getting some more information out to you all about our state activities in the coming month. All right. Well, we should let you all go. We'll give you 8 minutes of your day back. But thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you next month if we don't see you before.
Great to see everybody.